I never really second-guessed any of that time and helping out and assisting mum with anything like that. To me, like, mum was mum. Like, she did that to me when I was young, so in a way, the best I could do now or back then was to give that back to her as well.
Welcome to My Life with Dementia, a podcast from Dementia UK. I'm Kuli Bikini. After losing my dad to vascular dementia, I wanted to share stories of other families who are facing dementia and finding a way through it. So in this series, you'll hear how people are adjusting to life with dementia or the loss of a loved one, and how Dementia UK specialist Admiral nurses can be there for you in the toughest moments. If this is your first time listening, welcome. You can find a link to Dementia UK's helpline in the show description and a wealth of information in every episode. If you're joining us again, welcome back. Chloe and Amy were just 12 and 18 years old when their mum Sarah began to show symptoms of young onset dementia. At the time, Chloe was in secondary school and Amy was working in her first job as a legal secretary. Over the following 4 years, the two sisters and their dad Rob became full-time carers as Sarah's dementia rapidly progressed. Under incredibly challenging circumstances, the three of them pulled together as a team, supporting each other to juggle work, school, and looking after Sarah. When their mum died in November 2021, it marked the beginning of a new chapter for Chloe and Amy. Grieving the loss of their mum and all the life ahead of them that she would miss.
I'm Amy Lambert, I'm 28 years old from South East London, and you are?
I'm Chloe Lambert, Amy's sister, and I am 22 years old, also from South East London. So we grew up with our mum and dad, Rob and Sarah, and then we've got an older sister as well called Becky, and we've also got a dog called Betsy.
Growing up with our family was always very funny, very hectic. We used to take our Sundays very seriously because that was always
Absolutely.
that was always our family day, wasn't it?
Yeah.
We'd always, pop out to the shops or go for a walk in Greenwich or something. And yeah, as we kind of both got older, Mum would take us to go see musicals in the West End.
Yeah, we loved the theatre.
And that was always like a massive thing that we always, all three of us kind of bonded over, wasn't
100%.
it? We'd always like put show tunes on as well in the car when we were like going to go see like our great granddad, and we'd all be
Yes,
singing
yeah.
along at the top of our voices.
100%.
So yeah, I think we can kind of say that we were quite a loud, bubbly family.
Definitely.
And it was definitely full of a lot of love.
Yes, definitely. We might not be musically talented, but
We really
were
tried.
in that 30-minute car journey. We were.
Yeah. I do remember you being born, and yeah, I remember holding you for the first time, and it was a really weird and surreal moment because I always wanted like, my little best friend.
Yeah.
Because I was, about 6 or 7 when you were born. So it was, yeah, really, just really lovely.
Life-changing moment for you.
Life-changing moment
I
for
bet.
me. I think we definitely have a stronger sisterly bond than
100%.
any other kind of sisters that I
think
know.
so. Yeah.
I think that's because we've kind of experienced so much
Exactly.
together.
Yeah.
And probably because you were so young as well when Mum got diagnosed, that I did kind of have to step up to be
Yeah.
that maternal role for you.
Definitely.
Which was definitely a challenge. You weren't the easiest of teenagers, but but yeah,
It's keeping you on your toes for
definitely
sure.
keeping on my toes, yes.
Chloe and Amy's mum Sarah was a teaching assistant at their primary school.
I remember walking to school each morning with mum. Those 10-15 minutes were the best time of the whole entire day, weren't they? We used to talk about anything and everything.
Yeah. Dad used to be a baker, didn't he?
Yes.
But he actually had an accident when I was about 8 years old,
Yeah.
which left him disabled. So he was retired essentially, and Mum was his primary caregiver for
Yes.
a lot of our childhood, I think.
Definitely.
So I think that kind of says a lot about who she was as a person. She was very loving, and one thing that everyone always used to say about her was just how friendly and funny she was, and flappy, and I think everyone used to love her.
100%.
Around 2016, the family started noticing some changes in Sarah's behaviour?
She would kind of go out, not come back with anything. She would go
Yes.
shopping, and because she didn't come back with anything, she would then have to go back out. And yeah, her personality changed quite rapidly, I would say. So I remember like Dad and I kind of keeping a note like mentally of like what kind of changes we've noticed. Driving became, a bit more erratic because she was always a very safe driver, and she would kind of forget how to do things. I remember when she was cooking you like chicken nuggets once, she forgot to turn the oven on, for example. And I think the big changes probably came in about 2017, the year before she was diagnosed. We went on a holiday to Dominican Republic,
Yes.
where she would kind of go off and just go for walks.
Yeah, always go for walks. And whenever we had like dinner in the evening, we would there was loads of different restaurants
Yes.
on the complex and stuff. But Mum would always want to go back to the buffet just to get jelly for dinner. And we tried to explain there's so many other restaurants here.
Yeah.
But Mum was just fixated on the jelly. And all what she wanted was to eat jelly and ice cream, wasn't it?
And I remember one time it not being there. She was getting herself quite worked up about it, but yeah, that was definitely like a moment where all three of us kind of
thought something's not too right.
Yeah, this is not Mum, and she wouldn't have done this a couple of years ago. So I think that definitely was like the turning point, and that's when Dad and I kind of started exploring options into what could it have possibly been that's caused this, like menopause, for example. I thought it was menopause for quite a few months, and I was Googling about that just to see what symptoms. And then I was trying to book her doctor's appointments to get her bloods and hormones checked. And she would ring up as soon as they're booked to cancel them or just not turn up. So again, things that are very, very out of character for Mum, weren't they?
Definitely, for sure.
Chloe and Amy's dad, Rob, has spoken to his best friend about what was happening with Sarah, and his friend's wife was a nurse. She was the one who first suggested that Sarah might have young onset dementia, which is when dementia symptoms start before the age of 65.
And I remember at the time thinking she's way too young to, even have that diagnosis.
Because Mum probably at that time was 46, 47.
46, yeah. And I remember that looking at all the symptoms, and they just married up completely to what Mum had. And then I think because it made so much sense, Dad then started the ball rolling on getting Mum a diagnosis. There was a lot of tests kind of involved, but I don't think she ever really understood, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
But
I think it was important for all of us to be a team. It wasn't we was against Mum. We just wanted to just keep her reassured and keep her relaxed, and also kind of explain to her that we're a team, we can get through this.
In June 2018, Sarah was diagnosed with young onset frontotemporal dementia. She was just 46 years old. Frontotemporal dementia is an umbrella term for a group of dementias that mainly affect the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain. These are the bits of the brain that are responsible for personality, behaviour, language, and speech.
She was always quite stressed, wasn't she, once she was diagnosed, and she was always very anxious after that as well.
Definitely.
So I think how we kind of spoke to Mum was always kind of in a jokey way, or trying to calm her down, or
100%.
I would always give her cuddles and then be I'd be annoying to her. So
but a lot more reassurance in that sense.
I wanted
as well.
that kind of security,
100%.
You can trust us, they were your daughters. I think I was about 19 or 20 when Mum first started showing symptoms and then was diagnosed. You were a lot younger, obviously.
Yeah, I was deep into year 7 and year 8. But yeah, very young to kind of juggle with that, as I'm sure in your early career, having to juggle everything as well.
Yeah, definitely a journey, definitely hard, especially when trying to explain to people, and because you're so young, people don't really expect you to have a parent who is quite that unwell. So having to kind of learn to be open and explain to people about it, because I think I've always been kind of private, and that was a really hard moment for me. So I can imagine I was probably very hard for you as well.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with like teachers and friends and everything. And at such a young age, you're still like learning who your friends are and everything like that. Everything just happened so fast after that.
Yeah, everything after that moment when she was diagnosed, it seemed that she rapidly went downhill. Her personality definitely changed quite rapidly. Yeah. But I think because we had the diagnosis, we could actually attempt to get somewhere with it, and we could learn to understand the situation that we were in. 100%. And I think after that moment, definitely a lot more sensitive towards the subject and towards mum.
Amy remembers there was almost no information online about what frontotemporal dementia even was.
I do remember seeing it on Dementia UK's website, and I remember printing it off and giving it to Dad, and like our nan, for example, like printing it off and just kind of sharing that so we all had like a wider understanding of it. But yeah, just it was a scary time for sure.
Scary and confusing.
Very confusing.
For not only mum, but all of us as well.
The whole family, for sure. Yeah. One thing I remember, Dad kind of saying as soon as mum got really unwell was, you know, just in case she declines fast, or, you know, if anything was to happen, to get the lasting power of attorney, both in finance and health, over herself and him. And I remember being like 19 and Dad doing that and thinking like, this is really scary. No one at that age should kind of be doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you were a bit too young, I think, to be a part of this conversation. But I think one of the social workers, like when we were sorting stuff with them, asked the question of like DNR, so do not resuscitate. And I remember Dad not wanting to answer without speaking to me. And I remember that was a really easy but difficult decision, because it was a straight up DNR. Like, we don't want, like, she's already got enough. We don't want her to, you know, if anything was to happen, for her to then wake up and be, you know, even worse or even more confused than she already was. And that was a big thing, but it was such an easy answer just to be like, no, we definitely want a DNR in place.
As the whole family began adjusting to this new reality, Amy and Chloe both benefited from counselling. Amy began to see a counsellor who offered CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy.
I've always had anxiety, haven't I? So thinking it was that moment where it was kind of like, need to talk to somebody about this and understand
definitely,
and learn how to deal with it. And I remember after that kind of being still angry at the world that, you know, this has kind of happened to us.
And like, why us? Why mum?
Yeah, because there was always those questions 100%. Between us, wasn't there? Like, why? I remember us crying a lot of the time at that time, just kind of crying and saying like, why? But I think CBT kind of helped me understand how to deal with my own emotions on like an external level. And I remember your school, they organised some like counselling for you, didn't they?
Yeah, I remember, I think it must have either been your dad. I think you probably called up the school and just explained like, is it okay if Chloe goes on like the waiting list for a counsellor and everything? And
that was me.
Yes, that was you. And there, literally 2 weeks later, I had a session with my counsellor at the time, who was just so supportive and just really understanding, in that sense that sometimes I wouldn't even speak to her. I would literally just go in the room and just cry, and just kind of like having that outlet to someone who isn't in your like household, who doesn't really fully understand what is going on. But just to have that external person again, like an outsider,
even listen to you.
It was like a shoulder to cry on kind of thing.
Chloe kept seeing the counsellor all through school and sixth form too. And for both sisters, having that outside support was invaluable. Because even though both of them were still so young, they were rapidly becoming full-time carers for their mum.
I think it took about a year for her, not even a year, probably about 9 months for her to one day be going out by herself, going for
Yeah.
walks,
Taking Betsy, our dog.
to then not, because she would get lost, or asking asking questions on where she's going, even though we've always lived in the house that we lived in. So yeah, I think it was quite a rapid change in that kind of like 9 months to a year. And I think because I was full-time working, you were obviously at school. I think Dad obviously, was at home with her every day, kind of doing that side of stuff. And I don't think it was until like COVID, where I obviously was like working from home, you had no school. And I think it was from that moment that I massively saw the change. There were things that obviously stories that Dad would tell us, from when we were at school or at work. And that was the moment where I was kind of like, I'm actually seeing this like play out in action. And I think that COVID in itself was a blessing, because we got to spend so much time with
100%.
Mum and looking after her. We would have to take her, for like walks ourselves, or we would go, we had quite a big garden, didn't we? So we would go for walks around our garden.
I do remember we sat down, we did some like painting, like pens, and
she got bored pretty quick of that.
She did.
And jigsaw puzzles.
Her attention span,
attention span got a lot worse, didn't
Definitely.
it? I think it was COVID as well, where Mum became like incontinent as well, and required a lot more of the like round the clock care. For example, like showering her, getting her dressed in the morning, getting her to take her medication, waking her up, putting her to bed. And I remember that being like, we all take a shift.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
we all chip in, we all help, because we were all at home.
Yeah.
And it was no longer just on one person.
We were a team.
Yeah.
We were all playing our part in it.
Yeah.
And I don't think if we didn't all play our part in it, then we wasn't a
team,
unit.
no.
Like we've always said from the start,
we do this together.
All in this, exactly.
Yeah.
All in this together.
And we all support each other. We all, if one of us got a bit too overwhelmed, then it was always, you walk away. Like, you walk away from it, you calm down, you don't get upset or anxious. Like, you just try to put on like a brave face in front of Mum. Did you ever find it like difficult when Mum became like incontinent for the first time, or us having to like do more around the clock, for example?
To be fair, like I never really second guessed any of that time and helping out and assisting Mum with anything like that. To me, like, Mum was Mum. Like, she did that to me when I was young. So in a way, the best I could do now or back then was to give that back to her as well. I just didn't really second guess it. I thought, that's my mum, so of course I'll help. Like, that's our mum, so 100%. Yeah. That was our job.
Yeah.
That was our role. And
that was the cards that were handed to us.
Although Chloe and Amy tried to take everything in their stride, by 2020, Sarah's dementia was much more advanced than the family had expected it to be at that point.
The next big thing for me, where I was like, this is again a huge declining moment, was when I used to have to feed her around the dinner table during COVID as well. I think Dad would do all of us dinner, but I used to have mine a lot later. And I used to come down every day at about 5 o'clock, because that's when Mum wanted dinner. And I was still working at the time, but I would just say 5 o'clock is the time I'm helping out with my family. I'll log back on at 6 o'clock, which is exactly what I used to do. But that's when I used to come down and feed Mum, just because she would choke quite often, wouldn't she?
Yeah.
She would, eat very fast, get very sick.
Drink too much.
And get very sick.
Definitely.
So having somebody else kind of feed her, I think, obviously made it a much less stressful environment for the 100%. Family to eat in, because I think we've always been very big on that, like, families eat together.
100%.
Mum instilled that in us at a very young age. So we all wanted to do that. But I remember that being a moment where I was like, again, we are declining far more rapidly than what
the timeline
kind of suggested.
Yeah. I'd also probably say, like, this was probably around the same kind of time when mum's speech was also declining as well.
Yes.
So you'd ask her a question and sometimes you used to just get a nod.
If
Or you might
that.
get a, like, you could probably kind of read her eyes, can't
Yeah.
you, and her face a little bit.
Yeah. She rarely ever spoke towards like the last year and a half, I would say. And if she did, it would be yes or no answers. That was, again, I agree with you, a huge moment.
Decline. Yeah. But you would always used to get a smile, wouldn't you?
Always used to get a
Always
smile.
used to get a smile.
And she had the kindest eyes.
She did.
And you'd always know what she was thinking if she was up to mischief.
100%. Because she wants that last custard cream. She's getting that last custard cream.
Yeah, she would cause mayhem.
She would.
She would absolutely raid the snack drawer, wouldn't she?
Definitely.
And she knew what she was doing. She had the mischief in her eyes. And she would just be like, what are you going to do? That was always very funny. We always had something to like laugh and joke about.
Yeah.
We used to be like, can't do that. You're so naughty. So
Definitely.
cheeky. That was my thing for her. Cheeky. Cheeky or funky.
Yeah.
You're feeling a little bit funky today.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Rob, Chloe and Amy were a remarkable and strong team, but they had been doing everything by themselves. As Sarah's care needs became more acute, they decided to try experimenting with respite care. That's when a person goes to stay in a residential care setting for short periods at a time. It can give everyone a chance to have a break and an emotional reset too.
It was getting, at that point, very full on. So she used to have respite care every 6 weeks, and she used to go in for about 2 weeks. And that was, just kind of time for, her to kind of get a break from us, because I'm pretty sure we were very full on looking after her, and for us to kind of have a break and,
have normality back, isn't it, really?
Spend time as a family,
100%.
like even going down to like, Whitstable to have fish and chips after work, for example, or school.
Definitely. Something so silly and so little looking back, but it meant the world back then.
That meant the absolute world. And
100%.
I remember one day I had the day off, I think, and Dad was like, do you want to go Costco? And me thinking, this is the biggest deal ever. Like, this is really exciting. Which is really silly, like, to think about. But it was, we never kind of got that opportunity to spend time as a normal family.
Yeah.
In April 2021, social services did an assessment and recommended that Sarah should have paid carers helping out at home too.
And so we had carers in a few times a day, didn't we? And
it started off about 3, and then I think 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Then soon after it was about 4 times a day.
4 times a day, yeah. And again, that kind of took a lot of pressure off of us, I think. It just, again, like, it just kind of just gave us a little bit of normality. Like, I could focus on work, for example. Dad was able to like go out with his friends, and he used to do his like model train, didn't he? So that was his like little like escape. So he could actually focus on doing that. It meant that you could go to school, do your homework.
And at the weekend on the Saturday, we used to get a carer in. Bella. We used to get Bella in, and she would be there from 10 till 4, and then obviously that meant that we also had our weekends as well.
Yeah, we had one day on the weekend where we used to actually just go to Greenwich Park.
We did, and we kind of brought back our tradition of going to a musical.
Yeah, we did.
As well. Obviously, Mum wasn't there, but it kind of, it felt nice to do something
and
together
spend time
again.
Together and kind of have a little bit of pressure off, I would say.
The team of carers helping make all this happen became a really important part of family life.
A few of them actually came to like Mum's funeral and kept in touch after. Like, they were absolute angels.
Outstanding.
They
truly
were incredible people. So like, I would say if anyone was considering respite or carers, like
100%,
it's not shameful to ask for help. I wish we did it a lot sooner.
Looking back now,
because it didn't mean we didn't spend as much time with her, because we were always there.
Yeah,
but it just meant that if we needed to do something,
we needed that break.
Yeah,
if we needed an hour away.
Yeah,
then we had that.
because you can't be running at 100% caring for somebody working, studying all the time. You do need that break. And I think until we started to get the help, we were like, whoa, we were doing so much.
So much.
Chloe, Amy, Rob, and all their carers all worked together to look after Sarah, right up until late 2021.
On Monday, the 22nd of November, we got the worst news ever. And yeah, we found out that Mum had passed away.
Whilst in respite care.
Whilst in respite care. We was meant to pick her up in
2 days.
2 days' time. It was meant to be her birthday, would have been on the Sunday. Yeah. And I remember Dad's running up into your room on the phone. And I don't think Dad said anything. I think he just passed the phone over to you, and I came out of my room.
You knew instantly.
And I just speechless.
Yeah.
I think all of us were, really.
Sarah died just a few days before her 52nd birthday from a brain hemorrhage that was unrelated to her dementia. Amy was 24 and Chloe was 18.
Literally just getting that call and then having to like take over and go into full on like mode of, okay, we'll go see her now then, we're on our way. Then me having to then tell, you know, like our grandparents, for example, our older sister.
Yeah.
And I think I was the only one that could actually talk at the time. I think you and Dad were in pure shock. And I think that was just me and my brain just going, okay, we need to cope with this. The day after Mum passed away, we had a lot of the family over, didn't we?
Yeah.
Where we were kind of just all sitting there in shock, you know, starting to talk about like funeral plans. And I remember when everyone kind of went home, and I think all three of us kind of looked at each other and said like, well, what now?
What do we do? Before of that, we had a purpose.
Yeah. And it
caring
did,
for Mum.
I 100% agree with you on that. I think after that, it did feel like we didn't have a purpose, which was weird. And again, I think on reflection, a couple of weeks after, it was kind of like, I have no idea how we even dealt with that. But I think that proves how much of an autopilot mode that we were kind of on. Obviously, Dad going from, you know, looking after her every single day, pretty much, for around 4 years to then, you know,
don't need to.
Nothing. Yeah. And that was a huge transition, I would say. And that was really difficult, I think.
Yeah. I found it hard to bounce back to what normal life was or would have been. And just having loads of free extra time.
Yeah. I remember sitting there on one of the like afternoons or evenings a couple of weeks after Mum passed, and I was literally praying that I could do it all over again.
It was only after Sarah died that Amy and Chloe truly realised how hard those last few years had been on their mental health.
I just remember feeling like really burnt out. Obviously, I was working full time, obviously caring for Mum, looking after you know, trying to have some kind of social life on the side. And I think it wasn't till, you know, as we said earlier, that we...
like looking back. Yeah.
I didn't realise how burnt out I was. And that was actually the moment that I went on to like medication for anxiety. And just actually being able to take a little bit of time for me. I think that point around burnout, I think, is really common in carers, because it's one of those things I think at the time you don't kind of realise until something happens.
Yeah.
And then you kind of reflect on it and you're like, I don't actually know how I was functioning. And I know you probably felt the same as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And
I think it's probably just because you're so involved in A, caring for that person, B, making your loved one feel safe and making sure that they're okay. You kind of like lose yourself within that, and it's so important to also making sure that like you're okay as well, because if you're not okay, like how's the team, or how are you, or how is your loved one also going to feel that way as well?
Yeah, I think that's actually a bit of advice I'd probably give to anybody who's like
Yeah.
listening or is going through what we went through.
Definitely. Self-care is important
Yeah.
just as much as the person you're caring for is as well.
And it's not selfish or
Absolutely
shameful
not.
to ask for help.
No,
Like,
that's why help's there.
how have you found the last few years since Mum's passed? Like, how have you dealt with like the grieving process?
Yeah, I think grieving, it comes in waves. It's very up and down. One day I could be like not totally fine, but I could have myself somewhat like emotionally controlled.
Mm-hmm.
And then other days could literally just be crying on the way to work, crying in the shower, crying before off to bed and stuff. But I do think like it's very staggered, and it's not like a straight timeline. Obviously having worse days and better days and stuff. But having grief on a person such as mum and like a loved one just proves how much they were loved. And there was a really good quote that I like. And the quote is, where there is deep grief, there is great love. How have you dealt with grief over the last few years?
Over the last few years, obviously I've moved out, and that was really difficult because that was the moment where I was kind of like, Mum's not going to be there for all of our big moments, and the griefs, as you kind of said, has kind of like come in waves as I've moved out. And I think that solidified that, Mum's not going to be there for both of our like big moments and milestones in life. And I think that has kind of happened over the last couple of years as well. It's like sometimes a girl just wants her mum.
Yeah.
I think this year I was expecting to feel really like sad on Mum's anniversary date. And for this year, it just didn't come. But the day after, I was so overwhelmed with like anxiety, sadness. And I think because I put so much pressure on the day that it didn't come. Yeah. And I actually looked that up after, and that was really common of people saying like it was always the day after, where it's that kind of like, oh my God, like that day's happened, kind of understanding that other people kind of feel the same. That was really reassuring.
Looking after mum and caring for her and all of the other like years after, it's made me such more of a patient person, and just truly understanding that you really don't know what everyone else is going through on their day-to-day life, and just respecting that a little bit more and just being more patient, I think.
I would 100% agree with you. And looking forward, I just want her to kind of be proud of me. I want to do life, thinking of her.
Chloe and Amy are now 22 and 28 years old. Chloe works as a legal secretary at a law firm, and Amy is at a different law firm, working in the community impact sector. Dementia remains an important cause for both of them. They first raised money for Dementia UK by asking for donations instead of flowers at Sarah's funeral in 2021. And they've continued to support the charity ever since.
I think we raised a considerable amount, maybe like a couple of thousand, from the funeral donations alone.
I ran the London Landmarks Half Marathon last April, obviously for Dementia UK in Mum's memory. And roughly, I think, again, I raised around £2,500.
We just kind of want to help and educate. And, if there's a family or somebody that needs the help of the charity, then having that available to them
100% is the most important.
This has been an episode of My Life with Dementia, a podcast from Dementia UK. Please subscribe in your podcast app to get new episodes as soon as they come out. And if you've enjoyed this episode, why not share it with someone you think might find it useful? You can take a look at the show notes for a link to our support services, which include online resources, ways to contact Dementia UK helpline, and information about Admiral Nurse clinics. Thank you so much for listening.